IVM. The Surya Championship, the famous weightlifting contest in her kingdom, is only a month away. Princess Neela loves to lift weights. As a child, she would lift dogs, chairs, tables, cupboards, and even the king. Neela knows that when she grows older, the king has plans of getting her married to Prince Vikram. But she has other plans. Neela wants to go to Tiber, the land of snow. It has the best sports school in the entire kingdom. On the day of the championship, Neela is ready. And she wins. The final scores are displayed and Princess Neela has actually won. Now you are worthy of being a champion's wife, says the king proudly. Princess Neela smiles. No, she says. Now I am the champion. Well, you must be wondering, what really is this? Well, this is an excerpt from a book called The Weightlifting Princess, authored by the guest that we have on the show today. Hello and welcome to Beyond Cliché. This is your host Indostal, and this show is all about breaking gender stereotypes. I'm a speaker, author, coach, and I am also running a campaign where I'm asking a leading diaper company to include the father's image on the diaper wrapper. We really want to create a new narrative where we sort of break the stereotype that's only mothers changing diapers. So if you believe in this cause, please go to www.change.org/papapampers2. Well, today I have a very interesting guest, and I must tell you, as someone who's so intrigued with the way books and fairy tales play a role in the conditioning of children, and also as a mom, I am super excited about this conversation. I have been following her for a while and also checking out some of her books. Yes, we have an author, and not just a regular author. We have somebody who's written 20 books on children, and a lot of them are around gender stereotyping. So today we have in the studio a special guest, Sowmya Rajendran. Hi Sowmya, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Almas. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Great, Sowmya. So Sowmya, we've been talking about this yesterday, and we sort of spoke about this unique fairy tale book that you have called The Weightlifting Princess, and the excerpt was from that. And we're going to have a lot of conversation around gender stereotyping, the kind of role these books play on children and as we are growing up. So I'm super excited about this conversation. We're going to be back right after the short break.
Hi, I'm DJ, one of the presenters of the Edges and Sledges cricket podcast. I'm based in London and host the podcast along with my friend from school, Varun, who's based in Singapore, and his brother Ashwin, who's based in the US. We've all been massive fans of Indian cricket all our lives, and despite living in 3 different time zones and having pretty busy professional lives, we decided to start our own cricket podcast in March 2018. After putting out 59 episodes on our own, we were delighted to join IVM in May 2019. Becoming the first pre-existing podcast to be picked up by India's largest podcast network. We've chatted with some awesome people, had some fantastic cricketing conversations along the way. But the main reason we do this every week is to have fun discussing the same cricket topics and issues that you guys are talking about every day in your living rooms. We're fans, not experts, so expect us to be honest. We really hope you decide to join us every week on the podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Cliché. Today we have in the studio Sowmya Rajendran. She is a children's book author and she's got about 20 titles to her name. She's also an English literature graduate. She's done her gender studies from the UK and she's presently working as a journalist with the News Minute. She's written a lot of interesting books and she's also been awarded for a book called Mayil Will Not Be Quiet. We're going to explore that. There's another book called Girls to the Rescue, which is my personal favorite, and we're going to have a lot of conversation around that. And of course, Gender Talk Big Hero size 0. जैसे कि आप सुन रहे हैं, the titles itself are so intriguing. These are not the normal titles you get to hear about children's books. So I'm excited about this. And Sowmya, today we would like to explore this genre, which is books and gender stereotypes. So Sowmya, I grew up fascinated by Cinderella and the Prince Charming. And somewhere my life sort of was so influenced by it that I was always looking for a ghode pe aane wala Rajkumar. And I sort of spoke about that in my last podcast as well. So tell us about your journey. How did you land in this space? It's such a unique space where you're writing radical books around gender stereotyping.
Right. So, I was keen to do children's books for a reason, because I felt that if I had discovered and known all these things that I know now while I was growing up, life might have been a tad easier than what it was. So my friend and I, Nivedita Subramaniam, she's my co-author for the Mayil series. We met in college. And that's when we discovered the word gender. Now all school students know what it means. They know that gender is different from biological sex, and that it is a construct, and that, just because you're a girl, you don't have to do this, and just because you're a boy, you don't have to do this. That's kind of become a little mainstream in schools, which are a little more aware, I would say. But when we were growing up, we had no idea what gender is. So when we discovered this in college, it was such a huge awakening, I remember, and it completely changed how we, looked at the world until that point. So then we started doing children's books together. This was something that was very dear to us. We wanted to take this concept to children to make them understand that, just because certain adults say this, or just because the world around them says this, it needn't be the case. And they can actually question the status quo. So that's where this kind of drive comes for me. And I also have a daughter, so I should say that, I feel even stronger about that now.
Beautiful. So Sowmya, tell me about yourself. So when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite fairy tales, books, or nursery rhymes that you feel have really not been the right influence for you as you were growing up?
Well, like every other child, I grew up on fairy tales. The princess is, being rescued by the princess, and, everybody, the princess having to look beautiful, the princess having to be docile and demure and so on. Yeah. And even the Enid Blyton books, of which I was a huge fan. I used to read Enid Blyton all the time. The girls always took on a very passive role when compared to the boys. The boys would be the ones, solving the problems. So I did not obviously notice all this when I was reading, but somewhere it does condition you. All of these things do influence you. So I don't regret reading any of these books. I don't, because they have, they built me for the person that I am. But I'm glad that I learned to look at them with a critical eye at some point in my life. So, and even, mythology or these influences are there across genres, I should say. The way we stereotype people based on their looks, how we associate, character with what you look like. So that's something very common in popular culture, whether it's in our cinema or it's in our books. So my process with books really has been to make children be aware of this first, not to make them, reject all of that. I'm a huge consumer of popular culture, and I don't prevent my daughter from consuming it either. But I want them to be able to talk back. I want them to look at it and question, like you're doing with your with the whole Pampers ad campaign. Like the ad is there, it's there for everybody to see. But instead of just passively consuming it, you're questioning it. You're asking why not? Why can't there be a change? So that's what I want to do with my books.
Right. So what you're saying is we need to consume, but when we are consuming, it's important to be aware. What am I consuming? So if I'm talking about Snow White, and if that is such a big facade, and we're talking about women looking a certain manner, or if you're talking about a prince kissing a girl and then she suddenly comes to life and they get married. Hello, आपने तो उसका character नहीं समझा, उसका nature नहीं समझा, आपको शादी करनी है. So, there are so many narratives that I actually have started, just like you, later on in life, I realized that these narratives need to be questioned. So that is where it started for you. And now you want people to consume it, but still question, and choose what's right for them. So we're going to talk a little bit about the other pieces besides fairy tales. So you're saying mythology also plays a role. And I remember when I started the Chota Bheem petition, I read one of your articles where you had written about that. So what do you think? How do you think the cartoon space, along with books, is also influencing children? What are some narratives that need changing there?
You mentioned Chota Bheem, and then we notice, when we watch the cartoon, you'll see that Chutki is always doing the cute things, and then if they're doing some hard tasks, she's the one who gets tired first.
Yeah.
So, the creators of these works, they also grow up in the same society as everybody else. And so they have the same biases and prejudices that everybody else has. So when they create it, they're just passing the same thing on to their work. So, in fact, my book that you just read from, The Weightlifting Princess, came from a question that my daughter asked me. She's a big reader. She's an avid reader. And she asked me why the arms of all the girls in books, in picture books and even animation films, why are they always so thin? And she mentioned Frozen in this. Frozen is considered to be a far more progressive film than the regular animation films, because we have girls at the center of it, and we have girls doing things, and it celebrates female friendship. But even there, the girls, the way they are drawn, they still conform to a certain stereotype about how women should look.
Absolutely,
Yeah. And then Pratham Books approached me to do a book on contrary princesses. That's what the series is called. It's called Contrary Princesses. So I thought, why not do this? Why not give a child who's reading my book the impression that a princess can have big arms, that she can be strong. Why should she only have these delicate hobbies or, just do embroidery all the time? Not that there's anything wrong with doing embroidery, but in every book, when you see the same thing, then the possibilities in front of the child shrinks that much. So that's how it happened. And if you notice this, it's there across the board. Even, in the West, when they make cartoons and films these days, they're a lot more conscious about diversity, making sure they include even, sexualities other than just straight people. You have these small glimpses that they offer. It shows that they are pushing the boundaries a bit. But still, somehow or the other, when it comes to gender, a lot of films and cartoons do slip up.
What about textbooks, Sowmya? So I have a 9-year-old, and I remember the other day I was teaching him math, and I was like, damn, this is, so stereotypical. So there was this math problem where it said that Raju's father wakes up at 6 a.m. to go to office. And there was the entire narrative around Raju's father going to office. And then there was another math problem in another section that spoke about, somebody's mom making so many chapatis, and he had to add those many chapatis. So we're really talking about placing parents also in stereotypes. So what do you think? How do you think the textbook space is, what is happening there and how much change is required?
I think it's not just the textbooks, it's also the teachers, because a lot of the times the teachers also actively reinforce these stereotypes, in the minds of the child. So, and you're very right when you say that you see this casual sexism, benevolent sexism, which it's very much present in textbooks. It was there when you and I went to school, and it's there now also. There is this Tamil rhyme, which is very popular. It's about the number of dosas that people in the family consume. And the men always have more dosas than the women. So it says, Appa ate 5 dosas, Amma ate 4 dosas, the brother ate 3, and the daughter ate 2. So why? So that food discrimination is there, even there. The mother is also working, right? It doesn't mean that even if we assume that she's not going to office, she's also working. But that idea that women have to settle for less, from beginning with food to how they to their ambitions to what they're allowed to study, this idea that you have to settle for less is always drilled into us through books and through schools. And in schools, I've often found that if somebody raises their hand, this is actually a study that I read about, how even female teachers, if a group of students raise their hands in class to answer, they invariably pick the boy to answer first. So these are some very subconscious biases that show up in our everyday interactions. And many schools also tend to, for example, if there's a chief guest and they want to honor the person, they will select the fair girl of the class to go and give a bouquet. You know, if you're dark skinned, then you don't get a chance. And the lead roles in a school play or a show that they put up will invariably go to the pretty girl of the class. And they may, and even when it comes to sports, of course, a lot of boys are encouraged to play sports, whereas the girls are not. So it's not just the textbooks; it's the people who are taking these textbooks to the classroom also who need to, radically change their mindset.
Beautiful. In fact, I'd like to bring in a perspective here, and I'm sure you'll be able to add to what I'm saying. While it is definitely creating a certain conditioning with the girls, I think there's a lot of damage that happens to the boys as well, right? So if we're sort of talking about, let's say, textbooks, and, we're talking about, let's say, A for apple, B for boy, F for farmer, and it's just the man. Or, E for engineer, and it's just the boy. Or wherever we're inculcating this extra sense of competition, extra sense of achievement, or whether it is with the superheroes, the Hulk, the Batman, the Spider-Man, we're sort of creating this space where a boy is growing up thinking, I have to achieve, I have to compete. And that's equally damaging for the boy.
Absolutely. Boys also feel the pressure of gender. It's just that it's not talked about as much as it is with the girls, because for the girls, the discrimination is so obvious, it's so blatant, especially in a country like India, that it's hard to miss. But for boys, they grow up thinking that they are at an advantage, but they don't actually realize that because of this, they too are conditioned to behave in a certain way, which can lead to a lot of toxic, behavior in future. So boys who don't conform to the hyper-masculine image, they also face a lot of pressure from their friends. They're subjected to bullying. Yeah. They're not encouraged to pursue interests which are seen to be feminine. If you want to be an artist or if you want to be a dancer, right? They're not considered to be hard careers for boys. They're considered to be soft careers. So you have to take a job which will pay your bills, and Correct. This can only be a hobby.
Correct. You have to be this provider, and to be that provider, you need to have a stable source of income. And this is something that is sometimes so damaging to boys that if they want to pursue something, and that's why you have unhappy engineers, stuck in their jobs, and this is so common. So we're in conversation with Sowmya Rajendran, where we're talking about so many stereotypes around in the society. Agar humko narrative change karna hai, we need to go out in the society. And I think books, cartoons, movies, advertisements, all of these play a major role. Today we're going to explore more around the books that Sowmya has written right after this short break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I want to remind our Tamil-speaking audience about the new show from Kadai Podcast. The previous season was Ponniyin Selvan. The new show that we're doing is Sivakamyan Sabata. Kavita Jiva, who's the host of the show, basically what she does is she retells these old classics in a modern idiom. I think you'll really enjoy that. Quickly running through some of the other guests that we had this week. Luke Coutinho showed up on Cyrus Says, where he and Cyrus had a great conversation about fitness and all things related to that. Rahul Dacuna was on Gauri Devi Dayal's show. This rounds on me. Again, great conversation around brands and things like that. Maruk Inayat had Kaveri Banzai on her show to discuss Sushant Singh Rajput's death and the effect it's going to have on Bollywood as it goes forward. Archana Vora, who is a director of small and medium businesses at Facebook, she was on Advertising is Dead, talking about the kinds of work that Facebook is doing with smaller businesses. And remember, Edges and Sledges continues its fan series. Do definitely check that out. And last, one final thing, that Cock and Bull this week was really interesting. Cyrus, Kunal Vijayakar, Gauri Devidayal, and myself spoke quite a bit about the restaurant industry and the challenges that they're facing in this pandemic. So do definitely check that out. I think you'll enjoy that. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Cliché. Today I have with me Sowmya Rajendran, an author, a children's book author who's got over 20 titles to her name. And she's actually challenging the age-old fairy tales and narratives. So while most of us grew up literally reading Cinderella or Snow White or some of these other characters, Sowmya has actually got a book called Girls to the Rescue, because the narrative we heard was girls needed rescuing. All of these princesses and all of these girls in fairy tales needed rescuing. So she's actually got a book called Girls to the Rescue, where there are 4 princesses coming together, and they're actually their own saviors. They're actually 4 girls coming together and their own saviors. So we're going to explore that and much more. Sowmya, tell us about this book. I'm very intrigued. So how are these girls saving their own selves? What's happening in this book?
Right. So these books happened because as any other frustrated mother who was trying to get my daughter to switch from milk to solid foods, I used to tell her a lot of stories while feeding her.
Right.
And so I used to tell her the stories that I grew up with. And then I started telling her fairy tales. And then I realized that in every fairy tale, what's happening is that the girl never saves herself. It's the prince who comes and rescues her. And
Right.
I didn't want to go with that narrative for my child. So I started changing the stories midway. I was like, no, I'm not going to tell you this. You're going to save yourself in future. So let me give you stories where the girls have some agency to do things. So, for example, in the Rapunzel story, in the traditional Rapunzel, she has very long hair. And then she's trapped in a tower by the witch, and then the prince comes and rescues her. So in mine, Rapunzel is actually a basketball player who wants to get to cut her hair short because it comes in the way of the ball. When she's dribbling the ball, it's too painful to deal with her hair. But her father does not allow her to cut her hair because he believes that women should have long hair, and that's what gives them their femininity. So he's the one who locks her up in the tower. And the rest of the story is about how Rapunzel saves herself. There is a prince in the story, but he's not your, savior kind of prince. So he comes down and then he calls out Rapunzel, and then she says, why don't you just throw me the scissors that you have and I'll save myself. So she cuts off her own hair, ties it to the window, and then clambers down. And they do not get married at the end of the story. They decide to just enjoy the moment. So
that also can be happily, right? Ever after in its own way. It doesn't always have to be a marriage.
Yes, absolutely. And if you notice in a lot of stories, the women characters, the mother especially, is curiously absent. She's either dead or, something horrible has happened to her. And she's just entirely out of the picture. So in the Rapunzel story also, the mother is not there. But that's because she's an astronaut and she's gone to the moon on a mission.
Okay.
So just to give some kind of an aspirational model for what a mother can be also.
Brilliant.
The collection of stories, all of them are about the girls deciding to do something about their situation and taking fate into their own hands.
And what is our famous princess Cinderella doing there? What is her character, if I may ask?
Right. So Cinderella is, she's conditioned to think that her life has to be about housework. And she does have 2 sisters, but they are very cool. They are the very chill girls. And, they're always telling her, what's wrong with you? Like, there's more to life than just doing housework. So she does go to the ball that the prince announces, and the prince likes her. But the next day, and she has so much fun at the ball, and she realizes what she's been missing out so long. Just staying in the kitchen all day and just cooking and cleaning. And her godmother here is somebody who pushes her to go out there and do something with her life. So finally, after the party, Cinderella has this enlightenment that this is not what my life should be. And then the prince does come with the shoe and he asks her, so will you marry me, And also my Cinderella has really big feet. So that's very unique about her. She does not have delicate feet. And when the prince comes and asks her, would you like to marry me? Cinderella says, no, but we can have dinner tonight together. So
she's calling the shots.
Yes, she's calling the shots. There's one more story, Snow White, where where the prince, usually in fairy tales, what happens is that the princess gets married and then moves to the prince's kingdom. Whereas in my fairy tale, the prince decides to move in with Snow White because she becomes the empress of the region. So just to give alternative ideas and narratives that, things don't have to be this way. You can change it.
Absolutely. So I have an aspiration as a writer myself. I'd like to do something called the Prince Charming syndrome, because मुझे ऐसा लगता है that boys are actually tired of trying to be the Prince Charming to woo a girl, and they're trying to sort of build muscles. They're trying to work very hard, get those fancy cars. It's taking a toll on the man. And then once the girl is rescued, what happens after that? Then you say, oh, he's no longer the Prince Charming. Dude, he was never a Prince Charming. He was just a man forced to be like one. So yeah, a lot of narratives need to change there. I'm loving this conversation, Sowmya. I'm absolutely loving every minute of it. We're going to move into another section where I would like to know more about this other interesting book that you have, which is Gender Talk. And I love the title, Big Hero, Size Zero. Is this something to do with body shaming or the way we look? Tell us more. How have you tried to change the narrative here?
So this is actually a non-fiction book on gender for young people, for adolescents. And it talks about gender and its various manifestations, right from an introduction on what gender is, a very basic introduction on what gender is, and the various ways in which it happens. Like, for example, how does it happen in popular culture? What is intersectionality? What happens when your gender identity intersects with other identities that you may have, like religion or caste or class. So how does that change? It also addresses gender-based violence, which is a very important and sensitive thing to talk about, but not very easily discussed in schools and even in homes. It's the kind of taboo subject that nobody wants to discuss. So what the book does is to take the reader through how all of this. There is a fundamental reason why all of this happens, why we see all these repercussions. So every time there is a case that hits the headlines, people are like, oh my God, how do we stop this? And we need stronger laws. But things are not going to change overnight. You need to start with the basics. You need to start with a culture which looks at women and femininity as something lesser and lower. So what are you going to do to change this mindset, which leads to all of these problems later? So that's what this book is about. It introduces the reader with the very basic concepts and then takes them through the whole gamut.
So how age appropriate is this? Like, what age group is this meant for?
It's a young adult book. So I would say 12 plus, 13 plus.
So you've actually got books for different age groups as well. We're going to move on to the last section, but I want to know more about your award-winning book. And, you said that's where it started, the Mayil series. So Mayil Will Not Be Quiet. Can you tell us more about it, please?
So Mayil Will Not Be Quiet. Actually, next year, the book will complete 10 years since the first book was published. There are 3 books in the series. Mayil Will Not Be Quiet, Mostly Madly Mayil, and This Is Me, Mayil. So Mayil is, in the first book, she's a 10-year-old growing up in the city of Chennai, where I grew up. And so did my co-author, Nivedita Subramaniam. The book was initially in the form of a resource book on gender for children. So we had these little stories about Mayil, and there would be questions at the end of the chapter that a teacher could discuss with the students. That's how we had envisioned it. But when we sent the book out to publishers across the country, every single one of them rejected it. And finally, Tulika Publishers in Chennai decided that they would do the book. But they requested that we change it into a diary format so that the book is immediately accessible to children. And we don't have to go through schools to, take the book to children. So then we rewrote the entire book. And throughout the book, Mayil is growing up and she has a lot of questions about the world, which explains Mayil Will Not Be Quiet. Children are always told to be quiet. You should be seen and not heard. So that is what children are always told. And we wanted to break that. We want children who can question, children who refuse to be quiet, and children who have a mind of their own. So that's where the character of Mayil comes from. And she has a brother, parents, and her grandfather, whom she calls Tata. So like in every other home, she has conflicts, she has conversations, she has debates, disagreements. So Mayil is not a know-it-all. She has a lot of confusions. For example, she is not very sure about how she looks. She's dusty and she has her own insecurities about that. But she's kind of figuring these things out. So the book really takes the reader through those adolescent confusions and tells them that they're not alone. and that they can ask things. And it's not necessary for them to just accept what the grown-ups tell them.
Interesting. So I'm definitely going to pick that copy and share it with my son. My son's an avid reader too. But, we've had such a long conversation on how these stereotypes play an important role in the way we grow up, in our conditioning, and how they are not healthy. Sowmya, I'm a mother and I can't stop my child consuming this stuff. And you said that it's okay to consume. What is your message to parents that see their children consuming this stuff? Like, what can we do to ensure that they consume it, but they don't sort of ingrain this and imbibe this whole thing? What can we do, yeah?
I think having a channel of debate and discussion open at home is the best way to go about it, where these conversations don't just happen out of the blue, but are an everyday thing. Like if you go and watch a movie together, and you notice something problematic in the film, then discuss it with your child. You don't have to drill your opinion into them, but you can ask them, hey, this is what we saw in the film. What did you think about it? Do you think it could have been done differently? Let them take the lead. And you can educate them on these concepts. My daughter, when she was just 4 years old, I spoke to her about gender and what it is. And it was something she could immediately understand because she had already been exposed to those kind of statements, like girls are not strong and girls can't climb trees and girls only have to play with girls and boys have to play with boys. So all of these things are comments that you hear in the playground all the time. And parents are making it all the time. It really gets to me. But I see this happening so often with adults making these unthinking remarks all the time. So children already know. They've already heard it. What you have to do is to get them to think about it and not just accept it passively. So educate them about these things and just keep a channel of open, of communication open. Discuss it with them, debate it with them. Like my daughter is also reading Enid Blyton now, and she came up to me and said, I don't agree with this. She loves the books, but she came and told me that why is Anne always cooking and why doesn't she do anything more? So these are things that she has come up with herself. Like the same thing I told you about Frozen also. It's not something that I put into her brain. I just ignited a spark. And from then on, she's been able to independently make that kind of analysis herself.
So it's not like a sit-down conversation always. It can be in bits and pieces as and when you're communicating with the child. You spot it, you have the conversation. And I think that's so important. We talk about changing the society, but really it begins from our own homes. And I think you and I have a large responsibility in that sense to do that with our kids, right?
Absolutely. And I would say it's not just books and movies. It's also about how you are at home, the father and the mother and the adults at home. So if you're going to tell your daughter and your son, hey, listen, there is gender equality and the world is, you have to make these changes. But in your home, it's always the mother who is doing all the housework and the father absolutely does not get involved. What sort of a role model are you being for your children?
Yeah.
If you have a son especially, that's going to be a very damaging role model for your son because he's going to grow up thinking that he's entitled, that the world owes him all these things and he can just be there. So you have to instill in them that housework is actually a survival skill.
Exactly.
It's not about the man doing it and the woman doing it. Everybody has to do it. So these are things that children imbibe from you. You don't have to tell them this. So they watch by observation. So I think parents have that additional responsibility to be role models themselves before, going to their children and advising them.
Yeah. So, they say you be the best version of yourself and the child will just pick up whatever they see you doing. And I was reading an interview about you where someone asked you, how do you manage your roles as a mother and as an author and everything else? And you said, just like my husband manages it as a scientist and as a parent. Yeah. So we need more role models like you, Sowmya, for sure. We've had a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see the Cinderellas of the world wiping out and having new versions of themselves. We want more reinvented fairy tales. And I think people like you are doing the job that's required for the generations to come. So thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you so much. It was lovely discussing all these very important things with you and, having fun while doing it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you do resonate with my cause, please do sign the petition, support it. And for the listeners, please go to www.change.org/papapampers2. With COVID, quarantine, we're all at home. I think we can pick up a few tips from what Sowmya just said. Both parents need to be involved, and we need to set the right examples for our kids. So please do that. Please sign my petition. This is Beyond Cliché. I'm Almas, and I'm going to be back next Thursday with yet another guest that's broken gender stereotypes and moved beyond cliché. Thank you. See you next Thursday. Bye-bye. Ta-da.
Have you ever wondered how successful people do their thing? How do they navigate the challenges they often face? Are you wondering about the future of restaurants, film, education, technology, and everything else in between? Hi, I'm Gauri Devidayal, best known for being one of the brains behind The Table, an award-winning restaurant in Bombay. One thing my life as a restaurateur has given me is the opportunity to meet with some truly inspiring people, most often just by chatting with strangers at the community table. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about learning the new dimensions of business and understanding how different people swim this sea. It's an opportunity for me to pick their brains and ask them all the questions on my mind, whether it's about learning from their past experiences or talking about future trends. Through their journeys, stories, and insights, I hope you too, like me, will come away inspired and energized. So come, join me every Wednesday with your favorite drink, because this round is on me.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the IVM Podcast app, or ivmpodcast.com, or on your favorite podcasting app.